you guys a quick overview of what it looks like when you have a buyer that's ready to make an offer on a property. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pull the property up that the buyer is wanting to make an offer on in Matrix so you can have all the information ready to go. And then you're going to want to go into dotloop and create a transaction for this property. So I'll go into dotloop. I'm going to click on add loop. And I'll start to enter the property address. Again, I can get that from Matrix. So I'll go ahead and copy that address, go back into dotloop and paste that address in. And you want to make sure that you select it from the drop-down box so that your fields will auto-populate for you. So I'll go ahead and select that. I will click on import data. And over here I can click continue. Now I'm going to need to select a template. I'm going to want to select residential buyer. If it's already listed and the photos are up, it'll automatically import a photo for you. We can go ahead and click done. So now our loop is created and we can go ahead and go inside the loop by clicking on view loop. And what you'll notice is there's already a few documents all automatically put in your offer folder for you. You can drag those documents any way you'd like. You've got your office policy, your purchase agreement, and there's a couple other documents that needs to go in this folder for you to submit your offer. So I'm going to go back into Matrix, and if we look right here at this stack of papers, those are going to be the attachments put in the BLC by the listing agent, and that's where we're likely going to be able to grab the lead-based paint and the seller's disclosure. If they're not in there, you're going to want to reach out to that listing agent ASAP and ask them to email you those documents so that you can have your client sign them. So I'll go ahead and click on the seller's disclosure, and that will download to my computer. I'll click on the lead-based paint, and that's now downloaded to my computer as well. I'll go ahead and close that out. Go back into dotloop. And now I'm going to add those documents in. I'll click on Add Documents, click on Browse, and now I can find the lead-based paint and the seller's disclosure and go ahead and add those two documents to the loop. Again, I can drag these documents in any order that I want. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is start to add my parties to the transaction. So I've got a buyer. I'm going to want to go down here and add the buyer. So you can enter the buyer's full name. If the buyer is already in your dotloop contacts, their information will automatically import. You'll want to type an email address, the name, and you'll need to select a role. And in this case, it's going to be a buyer. None of this other information is required. However, you will need to enter the phone number for your client and click on Add Person. And now we'll scroll back up to the top and we're going to start filling in some of these documents. So the first thing we'll click on is the office policy. And we're going to need to set up signatures for our buyer. So if I hover over Sign Here and click on Assign Field, I'll now see my buyer's name and I can select that buyer. If I have another buyer, I can add the signature here, but if I only have one buyer, I can click on this field, go up here and click on the Remove Field X, and that signature box will go away. I'm going to want to add a text box so that I can print the buyer's name. And then I'm going to want to click on Save for this document. I don't want to save and share because I don't want to share these documents individually. I want to share them in one email to be signed as one package. So for now, this document's finished. I'm going to click on Save. Now I can go back into my loop and I can start to fill out the purchase agreement. There's going to be an autofill box that pops up. It's already imported quite a bit of information. You do want to check to make sure the information is correct. So on this one, I can see it has the street number is 901 500 and the street name is West. I believe that is incorrect. So 901 is the street number and the street name is South 500 West. So I'm going to want to make that correction. Go ahead and put in South 500 West. Now quickly glance over the other information to make sure that that's all correct. And I can go ahead and hit autofill. Okay, so now we're going to start to fill out the purchase agreement. When I look up at the top by listing broker, it automatically imported the company name. Now I just need to get the office code. So I can go back into the BLC, and right down here where it has the name of the brokerage is where I can get the office code. It's Sun R01. So I can go back and enter that. And now I need to get the individual code, that is their MyBOR number. So I can look at his MyBOR number is 8248. And for the selling broker, that would be Front Porch Real Estate in this field. The office code is FTRE01. And then it would be your name and your MyBOR number. And then for the date, you're going to want to select today's date. You're going to want to make sure your buyer's name imported correctly. Make sure the address imported correctly. You're going to notice that the township does not import. So if I go back into Matrix, I can always find the township next in the area field. So the area is 3007, the county is Hancock, and the township is Sugar Creek. I can also go into the tax records by clicking the tax ID link. And I'm going to see the township right here in my location information is Sugar Creek Township. So I'll go ahead and enter that as Sugar Creek. And now the legal description, lines 9 and 10, is probably the most important part of the contract. That is what your buyer is actually purchasing. You want to make sure that you get the legal description from the tax records and not the BLC. So I can copy the legal description here. And the reason you want to get it from the tax records is on the BLC, often it will cut off and you won't get that full legal description. You can see on this one it did get cut off. So again, make sure you get that legal description from the tax records. So this next section, lines 11 through 16, list all the items that are included in the property. Anything that's not on this list that you want included, you're going to want to list out on 17 and 18. Items such as appliances, basketball goals, different things that as you were walking through the property, the buyer wanted to make sure those items remain with the property. So we would just go ahead and list these items out. Okay, next section, lines 21 through 26. That deals with home heating fuel, and specifically, it typically deals with propane. Sometimes it can deal with oil. So if you're listing a house out in the country, it may have a separate fuel source. If there's a fuel tank, you'll want the remaining fuel to be included in the sale. If typically there is not, you'll put not applicable. Section C is where you're going to put the price of the property. So let's just say on this one they were offering $220,000. And then in the next space you're actually going to want to spell out that amount. Next section would be the earnest money. Rule of thumb used to be 1% of the purchase price. So in this case that would be $2,200. But over time, that number has decreased, and it seems to fall more in line with anywhere between 0.5% to 0.75%. So in this one, I'm going to put $1,500. And the next line is how quickly we're going to get that earnest money. I typically will put 2 business days. Again, you need to know your client. If you've got an out-of-town client, you may want to allow for more time. And we'll scroll down to Section E, the method of payment. If it's a cash offer, it's very simple. You're going to check the cash offer. Hopefully, you'll already have proof of funds that you can submit with that offer. If it is not a cash offer, it's likely going to be a new mortgage, and you're going to get all this information on lines 66 through 73 from the lender. So I should be able to speak with that lender and determine if it's a conventional, insured conventional FHA or VA loan. In this case, let's say it's an FHA loan. And the FHA loan down payment is typically 3.5%, so that means they're going to get a loan for the amount of 96.5% of the purchase price. Typically, it's going to be a 15 or a 30-year loan. In this case, we'll put 30 years. And again, we get this information from the lender. You can also get the interest rate from the lender. And 9 times out of 10, there are not going to be any points involved. But again, talk to the lender about that one. Line 69 and 70 is where you would ask for closing cost assistance. And when you get that number from the lender, you would want to write it as such. Seller to contribute the amount that you had gotten from the lender towards buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and other allowable expenses. Okay, we'll go down to section F, and that's the time for obtaining financing. It's pretty standard to apply for that mortgage within 5 days of the accepted offer. The approval, I typically like to set my approval just a little bit further than I set this closing date. So let's say I'm going to set this closing date about a month out. We'll go 30 days out, go about the 14th. And I'm going to set this approval date for 40 days to give myself some extra time in case we don't hit this target date of the 14th. Line 90, we're going to put 3 days after final mortgage approval. Line 93 deals with the fee charged by the title company. This is the closing fee, not to be mistaken with the closing costs. This fee generally ranges between $300 and $500, and in most cases it is shared equally between the buyer and seller. Next line, line 95, will deal with the contingency. If it's contingent upon the closing of another property, you'll want to check the appropriate box, and we'll assume this one is not contingent upon the sale of another property. Possession. The circumstance will dictate how you approach this section. If it's a hot property, you may want to speak with the listing agent to see what can make your offer more attractive to the seller. But in normal markets, we'll want to start by checking at closing. And then lines 118 is the amount that the seller would pay the buyer for days of possession after closing. So in this case, since it's at closing, there would be nothing due. But say, for instance, we checked within 3 days, beginning the day following closing, after closing, we would want to put an amount here. And let's say we put $50. That would mean in this case, the seller would be writing the buyer a check for $150 for that post-possession. Now, a good rule of thumb is to take the total mortgage amount that your buyer is going to incur and divide that by 30 to set that price per day. But in this case, we're going to assume that there is possession at closing. And line 119 is the amount that the seller will have to pay if they refuse to leave the property for each day after the possession date. So you want to make that a painful number. We'll go ahead and use $300 per day as an example here. Survey section, section I, we're going to check surveyor location report. In most cases, it's going to be at the buyer's expense, included in an allowance if provided, but this is a negotiable item. Surveyor location report is typically around $150. Flood area, we're always going to want to check in this box, may terminate the agreements if flood insurance is required, and we can terminate this agreement if we can't use the property for its intended use. Homeowners insurance, we want to check that we're going to have 15 days to acquire that homeowners insurance. Inspections, 15 days is a standard amount of time for the buyer to respond to an inspection, and 7 additional days if there are defects brought up in the original report that require further investigation. The limited home warranty, if you're asking for that, you're going to want to get this number from your warranty provider. Typically, we ask for the seller to pay for it and the buyer orders it. Hopefully, you've obtained the seller's disclosure in the lead-based paint from the listing agent. So you would check has and those fields. Title approval, you're always going to want to check this first box on line 242 to get a title insurance commitment for the most comprehensive policy available. Typically in Indiana, the seller is going to pay for the owner's title insurance premium and the buyer is going to pay for the lender's title insurance premium. Also want to check that the buyer will order the title work and will order immediately. Taxes, 99 times out of 100, we're going to check that taxes are prorated. Homeowners Association, so these are going to be the time periods allowing us to get approval from the Homeowners Association for a necessary sale and to respond to those documents. So we're going to put 5 days for each one of these boxes. Line 346, we're going to put NA unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement. We'll typically convey the property via general warranty deed. Further conditions, in most cases, we want to leave that blank. We don't want to restate items that are already in the purchase agreement, and we don't want to complicate the contract so that we appear to be a difficult agent to work with. Line 404. Most of the cases, it's not a limited agency transaction, but if it is a limited agency transaction and you're representing both sides, make sure you have both parties fill out the limited agency authorization form. In this case, we're going to assume that we're only representing the buyer. The expiration of your offer, you're typically going to want to put 24 hours. In hot markets, you're going to want to give a little bit less time, and there are sometimes circumstances that can require you to give more time if you've got out-of-town sellers or sellers that cannot respond digitally, and they're going to require wet signatures. And you're going to want to make sure your client's signature is all set up. You're not going to save and share this document because we don't want to send just one document to sign. We're going to go ahead and hit save on this document. Now we'll go ahead and back out of the document and go back into the loop, into the seller's disclosure. And on the seller's disclosure, we're going to want to add signatures of our buyer. So I'll go ahead and drop my signature field here. I will assign that to my buyer. I'll do the same thing on page 2. Drop my signature field. Can resize that if need be and assign that to my buyer. And then I can save this document as well. Now I'll go ahead and back out of this one and set up my lead-based paint form. So I'm going to have my buyer initial that they have received a lead-based paint pamphlet and that they've had the opportunity to inspect the home for lead-based paint. So I'll go ahead and drop some initial fields in place. We're going to drop 3 initial fields, and again, you can resize those to make sure that they fit. We'll go ahead and assign these initial fields to the buyer. And then we're going to want to check that they did have a 10-day opportunity to inspect the property for the presence of lead-based paint. So we'll drop a checkbox there and go ahead and check that for them. And we'll scroll down to the bottom and we're going to need to add some signatures. So I'm going to add a signature for my buyer and assign that signature field to the buyer. I will add a text box. With dot loop, you do not need to add a date. It will date stamp the signature. And then as the selling broker, you'll also need to add your signature field, and you can go ahead and dot loop, click sign now. And again, we're going to save this document. We're not going to save and share. So now I'll back out of here. Now I've got all documents set up, and I'm ready to send the entire package to my buyer for my buyer to sign. So I'll select all of those documents. I'm also going to want to share the lead-based paint pamphlet so that they've received a copy of that. And then I can go ahead and hit share. Make sure that it goes to the appropriate party. Click share again. And click done. Now we're going to assume that the buyer has went in and signed all of these documents. Right now I can see it's waiting on others, so I haven't received signatures. When the buyer signs, we'll see all of these change to sign. So let's assume for now that they've signed, and I'm going to select my documents that I'm going to send over to the listing agent with my offer. I'm going to need to send the purchase agreement, the seller's disclosure, the lead-based paint, and hopefully a pre-approval that I've obtained from the lender. So I can select download. And now I've downloaded all those documents to my computer. I'll go into my inbox and I will hit compose. 3 dots down here, bottom right hand corner. You can use the canned response if you'd like and go up to buyer offer. Make sure and change the subject to whatever the address of the property is. You can make sure and input the list agent's email address here. And then we can go ahead and attach our offer. Again, you're going to want to attach the pre-approval if you have it. In most cases, your buyer will not be, the offer will not be presented or respected without that pre-approval letter. And then we can go ahead and hit send to send that off to the listing agent. And you'll want to make sure that you confirm receipt. If they don't confirm receipt within typically 12 hours, you'll want to reach out with a phone call or a text to make sure they've received that. Hope this tutorial was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to your managing broker.